Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin. Our guest today is Mr. Jason Swick. I met Jason at the Best Horse Practices Summit this past fall, as a lot of our current guests have been from, and we kind of immediately hit it off while bonding over combing out a horse's tail with cockleburrs in it. Jason is a former college and semi-pro baseball player who transitioned into the law enforcement community. He did a lot of undercover work dealing with drug and sex trafficking, and then has been changed the course of his life dealing with the ramifications of having to act like a scumbag for years on end. He has been a lifelong disciple of Christ and a lifelong horseman. As he started having some of these troubles in his law enforcement world, the horse came back to him, and he started to really see the benefits of the horse and his own mental, emotional, and spiritual health and journey. And now he is transitioning out of law enforcement into a full-time coaching career, using the horse within the warrior community. He runs 3 different podcasts: Let Freedom Rein, The White Horse Remuda, and Contact and Cover. He also is the co-host and producer of Chris Cox's podcast, Come Ride the Journey. He runs the Day 6 Ranch website, where you can subscribe and become a part of his mentoring and coaching squad and benefits. And I would highly recommend checking out his podcast. I think you're going to find we're about to have an interesting discussion. I am going to warn you all that he is from the law enforcement community, and he and I definitely share a dark sense of humor. So this may go.
We'll try to keep it family friendly.
Yeah, but it's adult onset horsemanship, people. So
yes, sir.
All right. Well, Jason, good morning. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Daniel. I can't thank you enough for having me on. And I know we've been trying to get connected since the Best Horse Practices Summit. So I'm glad we were able to get things ironed out and get connected, and looking forward to being on the show today.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to start off with the lightning round questions, as we do for everybody. And Jason, these are for points, so you definitely want to put your best foot forward here.
Here we go.
All right. If you were a Jedi, what % chance would there be that you would use the Force inappropriately?
100.
Very good. Very good. Morning or evening?
Morning.
Bay or sorrel?
Sorrel.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Absolutely.
Are you a cook?
I am.
What's your favorite meal to cook?
Oh, man. I'm a huge fan of Italian food.
Okay.
So lasagnas and pastas, things of that sort.
Do you have a pet peeve within the horse industry?
Oh, I can't say I do.
Wow. Man, you want me to send you a list, or
Maybe that one should be multiple choice next time, huh?
Do you if you had to pick between having to deal with a horse that was totally feral, so completely wild, or spoiled, which way would you go?
Completely wild.
Would you tell us something unexpected about you?
I've committed a lot of crimes on duty. Got paid a lot of money to do it.
Okay.
We'll clarify that, though, as the show comes out, so you don't think I'm just a rogue cop out there being a criminal.
Yes. Yeah. Thoughts or feelings?
Ooh, thoughts.
If you could choose any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
The ability to understand what my wife is thinking at all times.
Ooh, that could be a double-edged sword right there.
Yes.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
Decisive.
What year did music end for you?
I couldn't put an exact year on it, but I'm going to say the early 2000s.
About the same for me, yeah. Somewhere around that line, it got, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse-related tool?
I can't say I do.
I gotta say that's one of those questions nobody has really had or they'll pick something generic like I really like my reins to be a certain way or something. I've always been waiting on somebody. Yeah, I got this bit that was handed down to me by so and so, and I mean like 30 guests, not one person has. I feel unfulfilled here. I don't know what the deal is.
I'm sorry I can't do it for you, buddy.
That's okay. Who was the best Batman?
Oh, shoot. I can't say I even have an answer on that. That's a
Okay.
bummer.
Sweet, salty, or spicy?
Sweet.
What is your favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature?
This is gonna sound so stereotypical, but it's gotta be the T-Rex.
Fair enough.
I'm angry and vertically challenged. I got short arms too, so we kind of see eye to eye on that level.
Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
Negative.
Okay. Just to let you know, we're about half 50-50 on UFO encounters that people have.
Hey now.
That I've had some shocking things come out of this little list. Like
Really?
Bay or Sorrel, I figured that would be 50-50. It's like 80% Bay. People love
Really?
Bay horse. Yep.
No kidding.
The decisive or indecisive question, some people take 2 minutes to tell me they're indecisive. I'm about to change the wording and say, are you decisive or are you going to make me edit out a lot of empty audio to answer the question?
It's the person that takes 2 minutes to tell you that they're decisive is the one that you got to pay attention to.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Jason, I'm going to award you. You're going to be our first person to break 900 points here.
Hey now.
918 points is going to be
Hey
your
now.
score on this. So that's our high score ever. And that entitles you either to a genuine compliment or an awkward silence, your choice.
Let's try a genuine compliment. Let's see how that goes.
Okay. So I find you to be one of those guys that is, and I think this perfectly suits what your former profession was. You kind of can blend into any sort of environment and make people feel comfortable with you and disarm. It seems from listening to your podcast and stuff, you have a lot of friends within the horse industry that are like Chris Cox and Jonathan Field and just a very wide range of high quality people in your life. And I think you're pretty unique in that way. Just like the pet peeves question, there's an awful lot of us that have got some baggage and a chip or two on our shoulders, and we don't all play well with others necessarily. And so I commend you on your ability to get along with people. I think you are, well, I only have people on the podcast that I generally do like and respect, but I think you're one of those guys that very much walks the walk and backs up the talk. So I don't think you're a poser in any way, shape, or form with this spirituality journey. You seem to be a pretty healthy place and the kind of person who's healthy enough that you've given that back to other people and helping them. So I certainly commend you on your generosity and your heart in that respect.
Well, I sure appreciate the compliment. And being a chameleon kept me alive for a lot of years. Being able to blend into an environment, especially a foreign or adversarial environment. And I think throughout my career in all the 911 services, you just see the frailty of life. And that has given me an ability to understand what the big picture is. And don't get me wrong, I'm not free or absolved of any baggage or chips on the shoulders or things of that sort. I got plenty to work on, but seeing how fast life can change has helped my opinion of what I'm really going to overinvest in or become bothered by, because we only got so many days and so many minutes here on this earth. So I'm going to do my best. I don't always do my best, but I'm going to try to do my best to enjoy those that God has put in my life and the experiences that he's afforded me, regardless of how comfortable they are, how much I enjoy them or don't enjoy them.
Let me ask you this, because I've done some rough stuff in my life too. I am simultaneously perplexed both by how tough and how fragile people are physically. Like I've seen people walk out of things that you're just like, there's no way.
Yeah.
And then I've seen people like almost die by things you're like, how did that, get us
Yeah.
here? It just
Yeah.
so It's
Yeah,
almost like,
I've seen people ejected from vehicles and motor vehicle accidents, and they're walking down the highway, and then I've seen a paper cut fold somebody. So, to that point, yes, it's a unique experience. It's a rarity, and I don't really think there's a statistical or probability that you could place on a lot of the survivability or how things affect people. And I tell people oftentimes that trauma is relative, right? It's relative. What affects you might not affect me, and what affects you might destroy me. So,
there you go. Well, why don't you? I gave a summation of your background. So if you don't mind, why don't you? I guess we'll start with however you got into horses. I know there's a story there for you, and kind of how it transitioned and morphed through your life to where you are now.
yeah, yeah. So I first got into horses. I bet you I was probably 6 or 7, maybe 7 or 8 years old. I had a grandfather who was an old school cowboy out of Missouri, and I started kind of your stereotypical way, or a very common way within the horse industry. I didn't come from a lot of money, so I traded work for lessons, and I would go out and clean stalls and things of that sort, and groom horses and things of that sort, and would be taught lessons in return through some of the people that were in my grandfather's network. And at the time, about the same time, I started playing baseball and organized sports, and there came a crossroad there where my family wasn't well off enough to do horses and junior rodeo and things of that sort and organized sports. So I sought better opportunity in athletics and baseball. So I went that route, kind of gave up the horses for a while. And baseball was very, very good to me. It afforded me a whole mess of opportunities that I probably wouldn't have got otherwise. And went and played junior college and played in the NCAA, and then bounced around a little bit afterwards trying to get a job in pro ball. But then there came a time in my life where I wasn't okay with sitting on a bus all the time and staying at Motel 6 and eating prison food just to make $1,000 in a month. So it was time to get a real job. And at the time, I figured, being kind of an adrenaline junkie, being hyper competitive, coming from a team sports environment, I figured public service would kind of be the most easy transition for me. So I had gone to school originally uh, and had a criminal justice degree. But the only reason I got the criminal justice degree is because it was the shortest major offered at that university. So it required the least amount of school to attend, but still afforded me the opportunity to play baseball. So after baseball had ended and I'd gotten that law enforcement degree, an uncle of mine who was a retired fire captain at the time said, "Hey, if you're thinking about doing the law enforcement thing, at least consider the fire service." So I went back to school and got a couple more degrees in EMS and the fire business, and started to go that route. And just by chance, I applied to an agency, a larger agency where I was from, and they did police, fire, and EMS. They're a very, very unique platform. I think they're one of two agencies in the entire country that hold that format. And lo and behold, I ended up getting hired, and I did the fire side a little bit early on in my career. It was a seniority based system. So a lot of the OGs held down the fireside spots, and the young bucks worked patrol because obviously it's a lot more physical job and a lot more demanding. Did a couple of years on patrol, started out kind of working gangs. That was my first niche. And then after that, went into investigations. And then while I was in investigations, that's where I really landed my spot in human trafficking and in that undercover plainclothes unit. So from there, I transferred out and ended up going to another agency. I'd had my daughter at the time, and I was driving about 4.5 hours round trip every day as a detective on top of my work day. And I just vowed that nobody else was going to raise my daughter. So I transferred to an agency closer to home and kind of repeated the same process, worked on patrol for a little bit, and then went back into investigations. And then this time I went into a formal investigations unit where I finished my career working arson explosion. So anything that burned down or blew up was kind of my responsibility to investigate. So that was my professional experience in a nutshell. But about the time, if I kind of rewind a little bit, about the time I got into that plainclothes unit in my first agency, I just, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, just the sheer volume of violence that I was exposed to, whether violence administered against me, violence that I was having to hand out just to survive and get by, and then working undercover and watching what human beings are willing to do to other human beings. It started to take its toll. And I always considered myself relatively squared away, mentally pretty tough. Um, like I said, very much a thinker, could think on my toes, could fit into a lot of environments, but the career had forced me to grow up a lot faster than what my abilities could handle. And I was well on my way to anxiety and depression, and my personal relationships were falling apart. I didn't really want to have any professional relationships just because of the sheer volume of the work that we were doing and the type of work that we were doing. I just needed to get away from it. So I thought back to earlier in my life when the horse just made me feel good, and I got back into it just for that purpose. Like I just needed something other than law enforcement, other than dealing with the worst of society. And that's when I got back into horses and kind of started team roping a little bit to feed that competitive drive. And then I want to say it might have been about 2015, 2016. I'd seen Chris Cox do a demonstration at the Western States Horse Expo. At the time, I didn't know who Chris was. I didn't know what horsemanship was. I knew that team roping, I didn't feel comfortable with the horse. I just did not feel like it was teamwork. I couldn't tell you why, but I wanted something more. And watching Chris do this demonstration with a colt, I said, whatever that guy's doing, I need to learn every single bit that I could learn from that man. And so I just went on a warpath to start to further my education and started riding with Chris a lot more often and went through several of his clinics and became friends over the years. And it was at those clinics where I started to unpack some of the trauma of my career and see the benefit of the horse in helping me look at the man in the mirror and be able to objectively work through things. And Chris and I had talked for several years about how can we use this same format of horsemanship to help the law enforcement and veteran community. And at that time, a big thing in the warrior community was the push-up challenge, 22 push-ups a day, or doing all these different, I'm going to call them silly challenges because they don't really move the needle. They bring some level of awareness, but most people do them in vain just so they can get a few likes on social media. So Chris and I are having these conversations. What can we really do to really move the needle and help combat these suicide rates and these depression rates and the alcoholism and the domestic violence and all the substance abuse and the things that come along with being in service professions where you're forced to grow up faster than what you can deal with? So that sparked Let Freedom Reign podcast. God had laid it on my heart to study the horse and learn the human. And I had a little bit of experience in human performance and stress management and things of that sort. So really, Day 6 Ranch is a convergence of personal and professional experience in my walk with God to use the horse to help the human being see their true and actual value. Because I've seen in my own experience that we get so caught up in the world's demands, and there's so much pressure to fit into all these different niches and stereotypes that a lot of folks just don't know how to deal with it. And a lot of the ways that we go about working with horses through that horsemanship route has biblical parallels. It has neurological parallels, in the form of neuroplasticity, rewiring the way we think about things and rewiring the way that we view things and rewiring the way that we work through stress and problems and things of that sort. So the horse offered an incredible objective opportunity for people to unpack stuff and do so at a rate where they can truly affect change. And that's where I've been settled in the last couple of years, is really developing the programs, whether it's the mentorship program or some of the online curriculums. Done quite a few speaking engagements to different crowds, whether it be law enforcement, military, athletes, churches, things of that sort, and really using the horse to help people get the most out of their lives.
Well, I think that's a phenomenal deal. I've been involved in therapeutic riding for several years. I've mostly worked with young kids and particularly autistic kids, and I've definitely seen some of the things that the horse can bring out. And
yeah,
I think a lot of the times when, like on my end as a clinician, you're dealing with people that have problems with their horses, that sensitivity is often the natural sensitivity of the horse, and the they're a very emotional creature, so they pick up on very subtle things that people might miss, and often we look at that as a problem. But when you're trying to fix the person and you're not worried about competing or whatever with the horse, that horse is just a phenomenal tuning fork to let you know when you're on the right path and when you might need to make some adjustments and things.
absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
they're just an incredible resource, as all of us who love horses should
Yes,
understand.
sir. Yes, sir. No, it's It's an incredible sounding board for the simple fact is that human beings by nature, we are very good at being deceptive. I could be having the worst day in the world, but I could physically present to you that everything's fine. I could put a smile on my face. I could change the tone of my voice, the delivery of my message. And all things considered, you would think I'm having a good day, but inside I'm going a million miles an hour and I'm stressed beyond belief. And that's where the horse has that profound role in showcasing that stress, right? So when somebody's telling me, oh, life's good, yet you can see when they're in proximity of that horse that things are not good, it allows the opportunity to start some of those conversations, and we can start those conversations through articulate paths. I don't just hammer everything out right away. As far as, hey, you're having a rough day, let's get right into it. We work the horse a little bit. We offer the human being those opportunities to open up, and really the horse leads the way and drives a lot of the communication and the traffic.
One of the things I've really tried to do with this podcast, I made it pretty long on purpose, and that was kind of to wear away that persona that people wear, particularly some of the other pros. They've got their canned speeches and their spiel, and I kind of want to exhaust them and run them past that until the
get beyond the sales pitch.
Now the real conversation begins.
Yeah, I love it.
But horses, they have that magical ability to already be right there. You don't have to do all the work to get past it. They're honest right from the start. So this brings up one of the things about you. Like when I met you, I didn't know any of this stuff, and you just struck me right away. Sort of like one of these guys with a halo around him. I'm just going to say it. Like just a genuinely nice, good dude, very helpful and all of that stuff. And then when I found out about the undercover work and all of the stuff you're doing, I'm like, he seems like he would be the worst choice for that, because I just cannot picture him coming off as a scumbag, and you pretty well have to be a scumbag in that world, or at least so tell me a little bit about that process of your chameleon abilities, because to me, I'm thinking I would peg you as a cop like so far away it's not even funny, but apparently you're still alive, so you got to be wrong there. So tell me a little of the tricks of the trade, I guess.
Well, really, I think what offered me the greatest success in my career, and this also created a lot of turmoil, is that I grew up in a less than advantageous community, we'll call it. It's a great town to be from, but it was a stereotypical blue collar town. It was a tough town, a lot of gang violence. Most of my friends, when you hit that fork in the road, they became cops or they became criminals. But growing up in those environments, you just learn to become, I guess you would call it streetwise, right? Or street smart, and understanding how to talk to people and understanding the profound power and respect, right? It's a huge anchor in the criminal populace. It kind of made the transition easy for me in law enforcement. And then the first agency that I went to, most of the people working at the agency came from money and seemed to have quite a bit of an entitled attitude and didn't display such a respectful or organized team effort mentality towards the job. And really, it kind of fell on me by chance. I was in burglary at the time, and a supervisor had come to me and said, hey, we're getting ready to head up this human trafficking unit. We'd like you to take it on if you're willing to do the work. We don't really know much about what the goals and the hopes and the dreams are, but politically, the Super Bowl the year before had caused quite a bit of headache because some high profile athletes and celebrities had got hemmed up in some brothel scams, right? They were paying for sex online and ended up getting caught up in some undercover operations. And I don't think our city or our agency or the local populace wanted any kind of that press. So I went to everybody and anybody that I knew within the professional law enforcement industry who had worked, whether it be child sex, adult sex, labor trafficking, any aspect of trafficking that I could pick their brain from, and just learn the how-tos and whatnots, and then applied my own techniques and abilities to it. And it's one of those things, it's baptism by fire. Like there's not really a way that you can train somebody to go in and buy dope and to go in and try to buy human beings and to go in and try to buy guns and things of that sort. You either got it or you don't. I truly believe that. there's small things that we can do to refine your abilities, right? But you either have it or you don't. And like you talk about the whole walk the walk and talk the talk thing, it was just I had a decent understanding because of my upbringing how the criminal element worked. Working gangs was as a cop working gangs was an incredible opportunity for me to learn criminal sophistication, and then that rolled into organized crime, and it just every tier that I went up in the professional criminal industry and combating whatever given the crime, you just refine your skill set. And uh, yeah, I mean, the other option is dying. You fail, you die, right? You're buying dope and they find out that you're a cop. That's not really a good thing. So you learn to talk slick and you learn to think on your feet, and you always have an exit strategy. And sometimes you got to put your money where your mouth is, but the other option is potentially fatal. So it's a decent motivator to do a good job.
That sounds fair enough. I'm so I just kind of have to go here because I'm a gun guy, and I'm assuming you're a gun guy at somewhat.
Yeah.
So do you get to carry all the time, or is that context dependent? Or because I would imagine being in that scenario and not carrying would that's got to be a terrible feeling. So
It is a terrible feeling. And yes, it's context dependent. There are some operations that, yes, you are allowed to be armed, but the more intimate you work with the criminal population, the closer you get. Yeah, they're going to check you for wires and weapons and things of that sort. All the fantasy stuff that you see in Hollywood, there are some truths to it. And if I'm going in to be Johnny Scumbag to buy dope and I got a wire and a gun on me, that's going to look pretty bad. So to fit in and play that role, no, you don't. You don't go in with communication. You don't go in with a gun, and you just go in and hopefully you got the stones to make it out.
well, while we're on that, do you have a preferred carry piece? I mean, it's got to be like the bit thing. Like you got 5 or 6 pistols, I'm guessing, but there's a sweetheart somewhere in the batch. So what's the
Well,
sweetheart for you?
historically I've always shot Glocks because that's what most of my agencies carried, and even as a UC operator, a plainclothes operator, we actually carried a subcompact 40 caliber gun. I would not recommend it as an undercover weapon. That's a lot of black powder for a little itty bitty frame. But I shot SIGs later on in my career, and SIG makes some pretty slick firearms. That's for dang sure. So again, that question is context specific as to what the job is. I do have different preferences, but I don't really have any one that is my baby per se. I can kind of get it all done with all of them.
It's a tool. Yeah.
It's a tool, a
I,
firm.
when I was a teenager, one of my buddies' dads worked for the sheriff department, and he bought one of the very first Glock 17s that
Oh,
came
no
out
kidding.
right when, and we went and shot it. And let me tell you, this thing could not hit the broadside of a barn. And I know they've improved them a lot, but that left a bad taste in my mouth toward Glocks that I have
Yeah,
still not gotten out.
yeah,
I bought
yeah.
a Smith and Wesson M&P 2.0 compact here about a year ago, and I went and tested the Glock 19 at the same time. And I have to say that I liked it, and I hated that I liked it, but I just still could not bring myself to buy it. Maybe another 5 or 10 years, I'll let go of the damage, and it shot accurately. It had a well, I'm a revolver guy, so I'm used to a very different
Yeah,
trigger.
yeah, yeah.
But for a semi-auto pistol, it had a pretty decent trigger in it and all of that stuff. But I can't bring myself to do it. But anyway, so
Yeah.
another just while I got you here, you see that deal of if I ask you if you're a cop, you have to tell me. Is that true or not? No.
Not in the slightest. Not in the slightest.
You kind of
I
wonder where
actually
that
I had
starts.
that on several undercover operations. Uh, I had people pin me, "You're a cop," and then I just flip it on them. The only people that call people cops are cops, cop. And then they get all frantic, and then they're so spun up they don't even realize where the conversation's going, and then they usually walk away, and you go about your business, and it's not a big deal. But yeah, I've had a few people try to pin me. I did get pinned one time doing surveillance on a kidnapping suspect. We had to run out the door pretty quick because we had gotten a location late on where this individual might have been, and I had gone out in my running shoes, so I was dressed like a scumbag, but I had nice running shoes because I was just coming off of a workout. Well, obviously, That is not normal attire for somebody that works the streets, is to have, $200 pair of running shoes on with their holey jeans and ripped shirt and unshaven. And I was able to get close enough to ID our kidnapping suspect, and he took off, and we ended up catching him. But later on, while he was being interviewed, after he was done being interviewed, I popped in. I'm like, how come you knew I was a cop? And he's like, dude, those shoes were way too nice, way too nice, way too nice to be a scumbag. And I said, yeah, you're right. So, yes, I have been caught with my pants down, per se.
Well, in your experience with that, um, like they say, most of the cops that I know will repeatedly say how dumb most criminals are, and that it's easy to catch them and all. You've come across some more clever ones, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when I having the experience to work organized crime on an international scale, these are highly professional businessmen. Their intent is completely wrong, right? It's completely malicious, and it goes down that criminal route. But no, they're very highly intelligent criminals. And I know a lot of people say, well, how can you give a criminal credit? Well, guess what? The good ones are better than us in law enforcement. Why? Because that's the only thing that they do, is understand how to make their criminal business better, whether it's dealing dope, whether it's dealing human beings, whether it's dealing guns. As a patrol officer and as a detective, I mean, there's only so much you can get done. And usually your work days are 8, 10, 12, 14 hours, right? And eventually you have to go home and walk away from it. But there is a huge populace of the criminal element that is far more intelligent than most people or most law enforcement agencies would give them credit.
And just I guess I'll wrap up on this and get on to happier topics. But in
Yeah.
your experience, the human trafficking and the sex crimes and all of that stuff, and I would have to say, like, if I were a cop, that would probably be the most difficult area for me to handle. Like if I walk into a room and there's a guy molesting a little girl or something, I'm gonna have a hard time putting cuffs on him rather than taking him to some woods I know about out of town and so forth. I don't think I'd have the self control to follow the law always in that. And so I
It's
commend you for that. But
yeah, it's I don't know, it's a heavy topic, man, and especially when it's tough when anybody's being trafficked, right? It's a deprivation of civil liberty on an egregious scale. But when children become involved, there are great levels of discipline and restraint that need to be deployed to do your job effectively. And using that restraint, but then battling the human response or your human natural response is where a lot of people get hung up.
I can imagine.
They bury a lot of that stress and pressure and trauma, and there's things that I can't unsee. There's things that will never go away. They just change my baseline in life. There's things that my wife knows. There's things that I've seen and experienced in my job that she will never know, because I truly believe God put me on earth to deal with it, to insulate and protect humanity from it. So it's something that she doesn't have to experience and they don't have to experience. So um, it is what it is.
Well, if you had to give just the general populace some advice on, like, I'm assuming this is more widespread and common than most of us decent lay people not involved in that would have any concept
Yeah.
of. Like, what advice would you give us to protect ourselves, our children, and so forth, so that we never have to see or deal with some of these kinds of things? Is it a stay away from truck stops, or what's the advice you would give us?
Here's the advice that I would give, and this comes from working gangs and trafficking, right? Most trafficking victims, most gang members, they did not have leadership in their life. They did not have positive influence in their life. So they went to the streets, not knowing the ramifications, right? And a trafficker would present that form of leadership or that form of care, whether it was genuine or malicious. And obviously, most of the time it was malicious, right? But it filled that void in that child's life. And then they end up in a place, they end up in water deeper than they can swim, if that makes sense, right? So my advice would be involved in your children's lives. Be involved. Provide so much value to your children and your community that they don't seek leadership anywhere else. that they don't want to go anywhere. Think about it if you want to make the horsemanship analogy. When you create that draw and that horse wants to work its tail off for you because it knows you're going to treat them fair, because it knows that you're a responsible leader, because it knows you're judicious in the way that you handle that horse, they don't want to go anywhere else. They want to be with you, right? It's no different in the human element, and this is where the parallels start to bridge the gap, right? When you are a true genuine leader and you represent true genuine care and love for your children and the people that are placed in your life, they want to be around you. They're not going to have their head up looking on the other side of the fence. They're not going to start wandering, things of that sort, because here's the deal: there is always going to be some form of an attack. There's always going to be some form of a challenge in life. There's always going to be some form of outside influence. And you could call it social media. You could call it mainstream media. You could call it different individuals that are placed in your kids' lives, whether it's coaches, teachers, other students. There's always going to be negative influence and there's always going to be a challenge. But the better we do at preparing ourselves, which means handling the fundamentals of leadership and love, the better chance that we have at success, or the better chance that we have of navigating those challenges and actually surviving the challenges rather than ending up with prodigal children, if that makes sense.
We I'm gonna get a little candid here and tell you
Yeah.
some of the epiphanies or deals that affected me here recently. I feel like if I had about another 12 or 15 sons to raise, I would probably figure out this being a dad thing. But I definitely feel like I kind of muddle it up. I'm learning. It's like your first two horses that you
Oh,
start,
yeah.
get a whole lot of experience, and you look back, you're like, wow, I really
I
didn't do
did all
a
that
very good
wrong.
job there. Um, but I heard this deal. I was kind of struggling, probably more my own ego than anything else. But like my sons can be turds around here. I mean, they I know they're good kids, but they talk back, they're whining, complaining, just like, am I doing a terrible job here because we're having to deal with all this? And I don't remember the source, but and I'm going to muddle what they said, but basically it was that if your kids feel safe with you, they act out at home.
Yes.
And if your kids are acting out in public, that's because they don't feel safe with you. So if your
Yes.
kids are gentlemen out in the world and assholes at home, that actually indicates that you're doing a good job.
Yeah, that's an indicator of tolerance. You got it, buddy.
Counterintuitive as it seems. So,
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing too. Is it with? I mean, there's got to be grace given in this process too. There's parameters in which we raise kids. If you drive them such down a tight road, then yes, you're going to drive them away, right? You got to loosen up those parameters. I mean, you think the width of a road, a typical roadway is 10 to 12 feet per lane. Okay, so if we, I guess, imagine that 10 to 12 foot lane, you might drift a little bit to the right, you might drift a little bit to the left. Heck, there's sometimes you might hit the guardrail on either side, right? But you're still traveling down that lane. When you make that lane 1 or 2 foot wide, it's so unenjoyable to navigate that road. You're being forced down that road. You cannot wait to get off and pull those blinders off and just run amok in the world, right? So there's balance on both ways. We want to give them being children or the people in our lives, we want to give them the ability to make mistakes and learn from life and guide them down the right path and give them the opportunities, like the horse thing, right? Oftentimes as a horseman, you have an idea in which way training needs to go, but there has to be some level of giving the horse ownership and power in making that decision. Yes, it's a path of travel that you want the training program to go, but you got to let them make that decision, right? If you sit there and drive nails and drive nails and drive nails and nitpick on that horse because they have to be so perfect and so in line that they don't know where the boundary is, right? They don't know how to make their own decisions. They can't develop the confidence. I always tell people jokingly, like, you don't know where the line is until you cross it. But if those lines are so close together and every single step you're crossing it makes it such an unenjoyable experience that you're actually detracting from the progress. You're detracting from the confidence. You're detracting from the independence that you're trying to instill, whether it be your kids, your horses, your employees, your employer. So it's definitely a fine line, and it's hard to say where those parameters should be set. I think it's unique to each individual and each process.
agreed. I definitely know on the horse end, there are those trainers out there that are really perfectionists and they're always picking on their horses, and that is the recipe for a time bomb.
Yeah.
That's how you build a horse that winds up with some of these really odd quirks down the road that we try to have to dissect and figure out how we got here. And it's by not making those lanes wide enough at times,
Yeah.
for sure.
Absolutely.
So just this also brings about the philosophical thought for me. So since you've had to be a professional dirtbag and you've seen the underbelly of humanity,
Yes, sir.
do you think that there actually is such a thing as good people and bad people, or is it more contextual and choices and opportunities, or what are your thoughts?
Gosh, that's a pretty dynamic
In
question.
30 words or less. No, I'm joking.
In 30 words or less, I think by nature people are good. I think in which people succumb to the pressures or negative influences in life, I think that's where the digression starts to take place. Right? When there's negative influence in your life, or there's, gosh, how could I articulate this? Because I'm running out of words.
No, no, I was joking about 30 words. This is,
No.
feel free to expound. Yeah.
So I think people have different thresholds in which they cave to pressure. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I've done, this kind of, it's funny you mentioned this because I'm doing some research now on the ideas of tolerance and resilience, right? On one side of the spectrum, can people take on higher levels of stress and pressure and trauma in their lives because their bucket's just bigger than everybody else's? They're more tolerant than everybody else. Or are those people who seem to be able to take on higher levels of stress, pressure, and trauma and be able to function at a higher level? Do they actually, are they more resilient? And in my opinion, resilience is represented by an actual skill set to deal and work through those stresses and pressures and traumas and not letting them have such an impact in your life. And I think that kind of touches to your point. I think inherently we are good people. I think some people cave a little bit easier to the malicious influence in our lives versus others.
Have you come across anybody that you just think is evil? I mean, like this, there's no
Yes.
good in this when this was,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
there's got to be a
Absolutely.
percentage out there that's just, yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't think a lot of people really take that into account. I've
No, there.
we see that with the horse world too. That I've seen enough to know we can't save every horse. I mean, there are horses out there that are beyond our ability to deal with, and you can waste tons of time and resources and expose yourself to a lot of risk and danger, or you can recognize with maturity that this one is just beyond what we can deal with.
Yeah. No, there was a case early on in my career. This guy's a bona fide serial killer, and it's one of those cases where he may have been good at some point, but evil definitely had a stronghold in his life, and there was no coming off of that.
Okay. Well, how about we transition to puppies and kittens and happier thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you got a unicorn around here somewhere? Go for a unicorn ride.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background with horses? Like, I guess we'll take it from the discovering Chris Cox and sort of your
Yeah,
journey in
yeah.
horsemanship, maybe some of your personal horses, or if you've done things on the side with other horses. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, shoot, it kind of started for me. Like, really, what drove my education is that I'm kind of a autodidactic learner by nature, right? I like to just dive into things and I like to teach myself and I like the experience of messing things up rather than and learning the lessons from it rather than somebody just showing me right out the gate, if that makes sense. And maybe that's a ignorant approach to take, but that's kind of how I do business. And when I was team roping and I described not feeling a connection with that horse, I really didn't know what a connection felt like. I know what teamwork was, and I know what a willing worker was, and I know what a teammate was. And I did not feel that when working these roping horses. And so that's what really started to drive my passion in understanding the horse because I know that to become the best at what you do or pursue being the best at what you do, you have to have a level of commitment. And if you're in a team component, you both have to have a level of commitment. So it didn't matter if I wanted to go out and be the best team roper in the world. If my horse hated me and my horse didn't want to go out and do their job and didn't enjoy their job, it didn't matter what my hopes and dreams and plans were. So that really was the genesis, I would say, of the horsemanship journey for me. And then piggyback into watching Chris, just watching the transformation of that horse in that, 30, 45-minute demonstration really solidified that there was something there. I didn't even know what something was, if that makes sense. But whatever he was doing, he was highly efficient. That horse was very well connected. That horse was very willing to work, and that's what I wanted to learn. And I had done, after baseball ended, I went back and coached. And when I was in EMS in the fire business and law enforcement, I always taught in different disciplines and profession, or different disciplines within the professions. So I knew what it took to motivate people. And I always seemed to get really good results. And what I feel sets me apart is that I have a pretty decent understanding of human behavior in the form of understanding our own inadequacies and our own insecurities. And for whatever reason, God's given me an ability to tactfully unpack those with people. And I tell people, I think the reason I'm as successful as I am in that coaching realm is because I've fallen on my face so many darn times in my life and had to dig myself out of so many ditches that I've just fallen on my face and stood back up more times than you. It's not because I'm an exceptional human being. It's not because I'm better than anybody else. I've just probably done it at a higher frequency or more often than you have. And being able to take very, very complex problems and break them down into very simple challenges and then building success on those simple challenges is where I've always been able to develop the horse and the human being. And think about it this way. So I run a little bit, okay? If you set the goal of running a mile and you train for, let's say, 6 months to run that mile, and your only goal and your only mission and the only thing that you can think about is crossing that finish line at the end of a mile race in, let's say, under 8 minutes, and you run an 8:01. Okay, test day comes and you run 8 minutes and 1 second. You did not meet your goal, right? When we take that same goal of running a mile in under 8 minutes and we break it down to the most purest form, which is the stride, how many strides do you take in a mile? How many training runs did you go on that include, I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of strides, right? That's tens of thousands of victories. We're starting to learn how to win. And then as we start learning how to win better and we start obtaining more wins, you start to become more hungry, you start to become more passionate. And that's where we start to change the thought process and how we select goals and how we go about goals. So it's taking those big, big complex problems and breaking them down into really, really small solutions that really offers the benefit. And as far as the horsemanship side of it goes, is that there's two adages that I've always kind of stuck by. Is that one, you don't know what you don't know, right? If you don't know how to fix a solution, you can't hold yourself accountable, and you sure as heck can't hold your horse accountable. And it seems to me the better I get at horses, the more deficiencies I see in previous steps or the foundational steps of anything, right? I mean, let's take a lead change by way of example. We're just going from a left lead to a right lead. But there are so many steps that go into how you communicate with that horse, how you put that horse in a biomechanical position, the timing in which you cue that horse, how you cue that horse. I mean, there's thousands of small little victories that have to get in place just to do one lead change. You can go out there and just mash lead changes all day, right? But if you don't go back and teach your horse how to understand a cue or the intentions of your cue, or you're not consistent enough with your cue that your horse even understands it, it's going to create a problem, right? If the horse doesn't know how to move the left foot or the right foot or transfer body weight, or you can't stay balanced, or you're riding their face, those are all things that are going to negatively affect that lead change. So it's taking a very complex maneuver and breaking it down into those little strides. And what I've truly found, and this kind of came from my baseball career and some of it in the shooting realm of law enforcement, that the people that perform the best, I'm going to say the professional athletes, they're normal human beings just like you and I. They just do the fundamentals at an extremely higher percentage than the rest of us. They cannot get it wrong. And that's where I've tried to help shift some of my coaching, is that obviously I deal a lot with the warrior community. We all have baggage, okay? Get over it. Whether you're in the law enforcement or the military world or not, we all have baggage, okay? But the way in which we view that baggage, the way in which we work through that baggage is going to determine our success, the way we perceive those experiences. And there was many times in my life where in my career, I'm just going to say force had to be used. Okay. I had to go hands on with a suspect. I had to get in a physical fight. I mean, it's been crazy. I've been covered in other human beings' blood. I've broken other people's bones. I've been knocked flat on my tail several times. I've had my uniform ripped off me in fights. Like, it's gotten really, really ugly. And when I was in the valleys struggling with that stuff, I would think, poor me. Why did that have to happen to me? I'm a good guy. I'm trying to bring peace. And all this negative is being brought upon me. It wasn't until I was many years down the road and able to look at it, look back at these experiences, like, I truly believe God gave me all the junk that he gave me in my life for these moments. So I can relate to a vet, so I can relate to a cop, so I can relate to a single parent and say, you know what? I've been there. I firsthand have had that experience, and I firsthand have had that feeling. And this is how I went about it. If that works for you, great. If it doesn't, so be it. But because I've had those feelings in my life, I have the empathy to help people work through these challenges. So, you talked about early on in the episode about my ability to be a chameleon and fit into so many different environments and just being such a nice guy. It's like, I've gone through a lot of crap in life to get to that point, to put life into the proper perspectives, to take that approach. And sometimes we get so buried in the circumstance that we've been dealt that we aren't able to see the advantages in it. And it's my mission and my goal and my purpose to open an individual's eyes to truly see what it is. And the horsemanship parallel would be your stereotypical rescue horse, right? Those horses are thrown away because they bite, rear, kick, bolt, do all these nasty things, but nobody has taken the time to learn why. Why does the horse act the way that they do? And I've seen some incredible transformations take place in horses that were honestly deadly horses, severely hurt human beings. But when a trainer or a clinician took the time to learn that horse and get over some of those fears and manage some of those fears and perceptions, those horses ended up being perfectly functional equine partners, But so often in life, we want to match the gas of success that we skip all those fundamental steps. And then there's so many holes in our game that we don't know how to deal with life when we get on the big stage and things become overwhelming.
That brings up a couple of things. One of the things that I always try to do as a clinician, I try to stay very, very real, because a lot of times what people hear publicly is always an idealistic scenario, and I understand that, but I do try to make it known that like if you're working with some of these problem horses, much like you in law enforcement, sometimes you get in a fight. You get your uniform ripped up. Sometimes that's not avoidable. You got to go through the ugly to get to the good at times. Like I've heard clinicians say that if I ever am starting a colt and he bucks, I have failed the horse. I'm thinking I got some bloodlines that you need to try out here, because they're going to buck. It doesn't have anything to do with what you did or not. They're just gonna. So sort of that juxtaposition of ideal versus real there. So I like the way that you bring that up, and probably as you become a more skilled police officer and dealing better with people, you get in less fights than you do as a rookie, right? But
yeah, absolutely.
At some point in time, you're going to have to handle somebody, and that's just a reality of the job. And the more you could be realistic about that and just recognize it as a reality, and it's not anything personal, and it's just you got to do it and stay separate from it, not let it affect your emotional or mental health or whatever, then the better you're going to be at handling all of that and not taking that baggage home. I also like I took this note here, and I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, but when I'd asked you earlier in the lightning round questions whether you were a thinker or a feeler, you immediately said that you're a thinker. And I think that's very evident in the way that you were just describing this stuff. I'm a thinker too. In fact, I'm on the extreme end of that scale. I always find when I'm listening to feelers talk that they talk in these big abstract terms, but they never come across anything that's actionable. where thinkers tend to break down the abstract into actual actionable, like your mile scenario. I'm going to run a mile at the end of 6 months. Maybe week one, I'm going to work on running 100 yards and walking 100 yards and running. And now I'm going to actually break that down into actionable, completable steps that will build me up to, this goal that I have in the end. I always find that the feelers, you listen to their speech and it was an hour long and it was great and you come away feeling good about it, but then you say, okay, well, what are you going to go home and do with your horse?
Yeah, what do I do now?
And you get the blank stare. I don't know.
Yeah.
They didn't really give you anything actionable to go home.
Yes.
And so there's kind of that dichotomy right there. We have to dance that line of people want to feel good and they want to have fun with their horse. At the same time, if we don't come up with actionable objective tasks, then we can't actually make progress. You're just gonna kind of dog paddle in the middle of the pond, but you're not gonna actually go anywhere.
Yeah, it's a great balance on accountability, and you described it very well, like with the horses that are buck, right? Or the buck, and you have some bloodlines that run a little hotter than others. Obviously, if a horse, and I'm using buck by way of example for conversation's sake. If a horse is going to buck, you have to start checking those boxes, right? Are they physically in enough health to where they're not having issues, right? That is causing the buck. Have we addressed fear? Have we addressed communication? Have we addressed all these small things that could result in a buck? If you've handled and addressed those things, well, guess what? Now it's time to just hold the horse accountable. That's a behavior that we're not going to tolerate and that we're going to have to work through. So how do we work through it? We either take all those other reasons that a horse could buck and we dig deeper and try to find if there's an underlying issue that we oversaw. Or you know what? Sometimes it's just that dog fight that you described, right? You got to get through the ugly to get to the good. And I think people limit themselves tremendously from a potential standpoint because they think so conceptually with goals. Goals are so often attached to events and not processes that when we look at the big picture conceptually on a goal, in 6 months, I'm going to run a mile. Well, you know what? If you've never tried to run a mile, 6 months might be a completely unreasonable goal. You might be able to do it in 2 months. But when we take that goal of running a mile and we focus on the process, well, what's the process of running a mile? I have to think about running. And after I think about running, I have to actually get the proper clothing and equipment to do the running. Then I actually have to get out on the road and do the preparation that it takes to run in the form of stretching or conditioning, right? Then you have to actually get out and travel miles. And when I started my running journey, actually, I think the first mile that I ran was at like a 14-minute pace. And this is not to brag. This is to demonstrate why we focus on process when goal setting versus the conceptual or the event-based goal setting. I ran like a 14 and a half minute mile, maybe. Now I cruise at 7.5 minutes. I run multiple miles at 7.5 minutes. I'm talking half marathon at 7.5 minutes, 8 minutes. Why? Because I just went out and I trusted the process. I woke up, I needed to run, I got ready to run, I made sure I was hydrated, I made sure my diet was squared away, I made sure my equipment was good, I made sure I had a plan, and I went out and did it. Some days I had great runs where I went faster. Some days I had horrible runs. But I always focused on the process, and the finish line seemed to always take care of itself. But when you stare at the finish line, you get lost in the process, and that's where people start to fall off in their goal setting, in my opinion.
I think, Jason, we've come to our point of having our sponsor for this episode. And given your background, I reached out because I wasn't sure if this sponsor was still going to be viable or not, given some recent occurrences. We've given them a few shout outs, but we are once again proudly sponsored by the Alec Baldwin School of Firearm Safety. And throughout the controversy, we stand behind Alec Baldwin because there's no way in hell we would stand in front of him. So,
yes, absolutely. I think that's a fair assessment. That's a fair assessment.
This brings up, have you ever done any cowboy mounted shooting?
I have not, but I have a great friend that does a bunch of it.
So I played around with it a little bit. I think it's probably about the most fun you can have on a horse with your clothes on.
No kidding.
But they load your gun for you. and that was one of the little problems I had. I just did a few
That would make me pretty
experience.
nervous.
So they kind of have their bag of blanks, and you've got your
Yep.
pistols, and you hand your pistol over, and they hand it back. And I was like, every time they hand it back, I'm checking the gun. How someone could, because you're right. There's people outside the fence. I mean, you are pointing that gun in the
Oh
general
yeah.
direction of people as you're doing it. And if you've handled guns a lot, the thought of just randomly pointing guns in the direction of people that you're not intending to use that gun on is pretty unconscionable. So
Yeah, it's a terrifying thing. For me, it was a huge eye-opening experience when I went from uh just being a cop to instructing firearms.
mhm.
When you're on the actual firing line, right? You're paying attention to your lane or your course of fire, whatever you've been instructed to do, but you're not really looking left and right at what the other officers are doing. But when you become an instructor and you step back from that firing line and you start to have that big picture, there is some crazy stuff that people do, um, and don't understand the potential mortality in their errant behavior. So it is a terrifying thing, whether the shooter is experienced or inexperienced. And some of those fundamentals, like which way you point a firearm from the school of safety that you were talking about, is a literally a matter of life and death, as we've seen.
Yeah. I started my sons off when they were about two with the cap
Yeah,
pistols with the little red tape and all, and we would practice
yeah,
finger off of the trigger and where you're pointing
yeah.
your muzzle and all of that stuff. And by the time they get to the age where we're handling real guns, I can breathe a whole lot better. But I actually do a fair bit of firearm coaching. I teach hunter education classes. I've
Oh
done
yeah,
workout stuff, and then I'm a coach for our 4-H shooting sports team. And there are some other people's kids that absolutely terrify me. I've had to pull
yes,
guns out of hands and stuff just because they're like, swinging the barrel around.
yep, yep.
That's one of those things. And I'm sure you also know, we'll get a little political here. We've got all this gun control debate. And always when you hear these politicians and people talking about guns, it's always very clear to those of us that actually do know about guns that those people don't have a clue how guns
Yeah,
actually function and what they're talking about. And it seems like you should be educated on a topic before you
I
can
and in
jump out
this,
there.
yes, I was part of our labor negotiation group when I was in law enforcement for a while, so we dealt very much with um, politicians who would want our union's candidacy or support, right, throughout their campaign. And it's very disheartening to see how uneducated these public figures are, these public politicians are. And they'll get up on a podium in front of all these cameras and speak very, very well, but come so from a place of a lack of education would be a very kind way of describing the delivery of their message. And I think, and this ain't to go down a rabbit hole, but I think if lawmakers really spent a lot more time in educating themselves into the brass tacks of what they're trying to sign into law, our country would be a lot better off as far as writing laws and writing effective policies.
Yeah. I feel a little obligated here to share a few statistics with people, and I didn't bother to look this up for today, but one thing a lot of people don't understand is that about 2/3 of all gun deaths every year are suicides. So what we're talking about right now, which is essentially, or we're about to get into, managing mental health of people and making sure that
Yeah,
they're in a good place. That is, if you're trying to lower gun deaths in the country, that's the biggest pot to go to right there, where you can make the biggest difference, because most of them are not homicides. Of the homicides, most of that is gang violence and all the school shootings and those sorts of tragic things that happen are a very, very small percentage of the actual problem. And also, just statistically speaking, way more people every year are killed by hammers and knives than guns, even including all of the suicides and the gang violence and all of that stuff. So to me, it's a ridiculous topic that they're not even coming close to addressing the real reason behind. A gun's just an inanimate object. It's the mental and emotional state of the person handling it that is the actual problem right there. And if we continue to try to ban inanimate objects, they're going to find who is the two guys that bombed the Boston Marathon. They used a pressure cooker and some nails, right? I mean, people
Yeah.
that do harm are going to find a way. So,
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. I think if this country could iron out their mental health approach or their mental health support systems, uh, our country would be a lot farther down the road because I can tell you, working in law enforcement, working in fire, working at EMS, the mental health system is very much fractured. It is a disservice on many levels, and that's regardless of if you're in the warrior community or if you're in the quote unquote civilian community. It's a system that's inundated. It's a system that's extremely ineffective. It's a system that's extremely inefficient. And a lot of things such as human violence and addiction and things of that sort would probably iron themselves out if we could find more sustainable answers to getting people access to credible mental health and care.
so to that end, you mentioned earlier about coping mechanisms and those sorts of things, and I think this kind of is a travesty of our education system, the way that kids will graduate high school and they've been exposed to differential equations and 2 years of foreign languages and frankly a lot of education that they're never practically going to use, but they haven't been taught how to pay their taxes, how to balance a checkbook, or maybe some coping mechanisms for the inevitable struggles that life is going to bring about. So on the topic of coping mechanisms and those sorts of things, where are you generally going when you're working with these people? I know there'd be a lot of individual situations, but can you give us some general directions where you take the coping mechanism route?
Well, I think the first thing, and I can speak in my experience, the first thing that I had to develop was an ability to feel. And part of my job, heck, we received training on it, right? Is stuffing down emotion because when you're in a life safety circumstance, you can't lose your cool when people's lives are on the line or when your decisions affect the mortality of an individual. You have to keep it together. Well, the downside to that is you do that frequently enough, you never get the chance to actually work through that experience from a mental or emotional standpoint. Why? Because your call volume is so high or you have to get home and try to get some sleep because you got to be back to a shift the next day. And then we don't even need to go down the rabbit holes of the stigmas of getting mental health, right? Or receiving mental health. But really, I think it's getting the horse provides an incredible opportunity for us to feel again, to understand what nervous feels like, to understand what anxiety feels like, to understand what depression feels like, the highs and the lows of all those emotions. And once we have some form of an ability to feel, then we can start to process things. Because like I tell people with post-traumatic stress, post-combat stress, however you want to describe it, in a nutshell, you have a traumatic experience and there's a certain process that your body has to go through to metabolize that experience, to actually process it and quantify it and make sense of all of it. Well, what typically happens is that process is interrupted somehow and never completed. You do that enough in your life, instead of managing and becoming offensive in the approach to your mental health, you stuff enough things down, you let enough of those processes be interrupted, they are going to blow up. And when do they blow up? They blow up in the form of alcoholism. They blow up in the form of physical violence. They blow up in the form of blasting all your money and not being intelligent with your money, right? So what I try to do is to get people back to a mental space and a place of confidence where they can start to unpack some of those things. And I'm not a psychologist. I don't want to be a psychologist. I don't want to be a psychiatrist. I'm a human being that's experienced a little bit of life and could create a relative experience with another human being to where they can start to see that, you know what? Yes, I've had these negative things happen to me in life, or yes, I'm feeling X feeling, but some of that is normal. And some of that is circumstantial based to where you don't have any control over it, none whatsoever. You can keep going down that train track if you want, or there's a few options where we can get off and start to manage some of those things. And really, I tell people the hardest thing to do in this process, as far as mental health or human performance, however you wanted to see it, is looking yourself in the mirror. Because when you look yourself in the mirror, there's so much shame and guilt that come with previous experiences, whether it's trauma, whether it's inability to perform, whether it's how you treated somebody, right? We need to start looking at those things objectively and what were the circumstances and the fact patterns that influence it. Like, I'll use an officer involved shooting by way of example. When we're investigating an officer involved shooting, we don't just look at the shooting the moment the gun went off, right? We look at everything that led up to that. What were the suspect's actions? What were the law enforcement officers' actions? What were other factors? What was the weather? What were the environmental circumstances? Was it in a city environment? Was it in a rural environment? What was the officer's workload? What was the suspect's criminal history? Was anybody under the influence, right? There's so many contributing factors in this that we have to start breaking those things down. And it goes back to working on the fundamentals. When we're just feeling poor about ourselves and that's all that we look at, it perpetuates the problem. When we start to look at why we might be feeling poor about ourselves, then we can start to take some action. Then we can start to set some goals in which we can move on and start creating those experiences or changing some of those fact patterns in which we think about this stuff. And the horse creates incredible opportunities to do that without being in a threatening environment. Because like I joke when I talk about the warrior community, if I got a buddy that I know is presenting with signs of depression and I'm like, hey, dude, let's go to the psychologist today. Let's go lay on the table and talk about our feelings. 99.9% of the time, the guy's going to say, absolutely not. I'm not going to participate in that. But when we get horseback and we go ride through the grasslands and they get to open up and they get to see God's creation, it might create the opportunity to have a conversation. Hey man, I know you haven't been feeling well. I see this, that, and the other in you. What's going on? They may start to disclose some stuff, they may not. But again, the horse gives us the opportunity to unpack some of the stuff at a pace in which we can actually affect change. Because the problem that we see in the warrior community is that when you experience what you experience throughout your career, I'm talking the horrific things that human beings do to each other, the physical trauma, the psychological trauma. The first major hurdle is the individual seeking help cannot bridge the gap and cannot connect with the healthcare provider. Like if you're a psychologist or psychiatrist and you sat in a clinical academic environment your whole entire life, how am I going to trust and believe and understand and know that you know what it feels like to hold a dead child? We automatically cannot connect. And that's what I'm here to get help with. So if I don't see any credibility in your life experience because of who you are professionally, I'm going to be a lot less likely to open up and actually work through some of that stuff. But when we get warrior communities together and people of like mind and guys that are willing to mentor other guys, I mean, it could be women too. I'm just saying guys for the sake of conversation, but I could take that same exact moment and say, you know what, dude, I've been there. And you know how this affected my life? And these were some of the challenges that I faced. And these are some of the things that I sought to right those wrongs in my life. I don't want to be the answer to everybody. I don't. I just want to be the spark. There's plenty of other resources out there that are going to fan the flame, that are going to water the seed, that are going to, reap the harvest. I might just be the guy that plants the seed. And that's where I think I take a unique approach in serving this warrior community is that God has afforded me quite a bit of been there, done that experience. And I was buried by it, but he's also been gracious enough to see me through it and carry me through it. And because he's treated me with such love and care, I have to be stewards of those opportunities, right? What he instilled in me to help me fight and work through these problems are not skills of my own. They're gifts I've been stewarded, and now I have to share it with the next generation coming through.
I think that's phenomenal. I think it also, a few of the truths is that all of this stuff does have a physical component. I know in my horsemanship journey, that's kind of new news to me, and I have to thank people like Nashawn Cook and Amy Skinner and Jack Blue for
Heck yeah,
making me think a little bit more about the like the posture of the horse being more connected to the mentality. And there's parts of that that are obvious, like a high-headed horse is in an obvious certain mental state, but it goes deeper and gets more subtle at the same time. So the physical component of all of this stuff can't be or can easily be underappreciated. And I think it definitely plays a larger role than most people realize. It can be one of the triggers, a certain smell, a certain sight, a certain something moved off here at 2 o'clock, just like it did back when. And we have a PTSD sort of a flashback scenario. All of those things are in the physical realm.
And it's very true to that exact point. My wife used to watch I forget what the name of the show was, but it was based out of a trauma ER. It was a fictional show. And when she would turn it on, I couldn't watch it. Like I would have to leave the room. And she would always ask, like, why do you leave the room when I turn this on? I said, Kelly, when they bring in a burn victim or somebody from a vehicle wreck, you see it for what it is on TV because your mind and your body does not have the experience of doing it in real life. When I watch that same exact scene of a motor vehicle accident victim coming in, like I smell what an airbag smells like when it goes off. I smell what coagulated blood smells like when it goes off. I smell what vomit smells like when it's full of alcohol. Like my body goes to those experiences, and that is a lot to deal with. And I deal with so much of it at work that I just can't do it at home too. So I have to set a healthy boundary, right? And for years, you'd watch the show not knowing any of this experience because it's my problems that I have to deal with. That's how I saw it. So I'm not going to burden her with it. But it just got to a point where I had to convey. So she knew where I was coming from. So she just didn't think I was vacating a room because I didn't like a TV show. That makes sense, And those are some of the, I would say, a more common hurdle that you see is that people watch these movies and these TV shows of these gunfights and these violence and these war scenes. But when you've firsthand experienced it, it hits home a little different than just watching an entertainment show.
As we're talking about the coping mechanisms, I don't have any personal experience with this, but I do know what I would consider to be the most successful coping program that I'm aware of would be Alcoholics Anonymous. And it really has a lot of the same things in it. We've got broken down actionable steps. Those steps involve you setting goals, taking accountability. You're a Christian, I'm a Christian, and so we're both followers of Jesus and the Lord. But Alcoholics Anonymous requires you to submit to a God. It just doesn't have to be that sort of a formal God. It may be some other thing, but that submission, that recognition that I'm smaller than, and I also serve something, that these all seem to be universal among the human condition of the path to healing, dealing with the trauma, getting yourself onto the right road. So in terms of your coaching program, your mentorship and all, do you kind of have a roadmap set out, or is it far more individualistic? I mean, you have on your website like certain coaching levels and things. So
yeah,
what's kind of the organizational structure of that, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
So the structure of the coaching is very depending on the commitment of the individual, right? If you're just kind of feeling out the waters, well, we can tailor a program to that. If you're wholeheartedly committed and you realize that change needs to happen in your life, then let's jump in the water. Now, I have some things that I think people need to iron out in their lives to be successful, but my program is not a cookie cutter program because of the relevance of trauma, right? What you experienced and what could be a problem in your life might not be a problem in mine, or it might not be a problem in 10 other people's cases, right? But if it's important to you and it's real to you, so we have to navigate those waters specifically. And if those waters don't fit into a lot of the typical cookie cutter coaching programs, then what service am I providing? I'm just trying to get you to conform into one of the modalities. And to me, as a service provider, that's completely ineffective. I'm here to provide a service to the individual. I have to bring value at the level in which you're ready to commit. And because it's so individually based, I have to be the chameleon. I have to be flexible in the way in which I approach it, because some people are wholeheartedly committed and ready to roll, and they have tons of resources and time and ability, and they're ready to make the change in their life. And it doesn't have to be trauma-based recovery. I mean, I have professional athletes, C-suite executives, people setting all different types of goals in their lives, whether it be physical performance or recovery or whatever. But I have to meet the needs of the individual. And if I don't meet the needs of the individual, it doesn't matter what knowledge base I have. Again, it goes back to creating that connection, building that rapport, and creating credibility with the individuals in which I serve. So in short, yes, I do have some things that I think people need to iron out to make sure that they can get the best out of life and really optimize the years that they have here on earth. But that being said, first and foremost, I take an individual approach to whatever the coaching goals are.
I guess this would be maybe I'll edit this out. I don't know, but I'm just curious. So I'm big on rapport building too. I'm generally talking about that with horses, but I have studied a fair bit of human psychology on how to do that. And particularly I've gotten into personality typing and stuff where my hope is I can meet this person and realize they're the thinker, they're the feeler, they're the whatever. And so my approach to them needs to be this route. I'm going to speak their language, hopefully. I wouldn't say that I'm good at that, but I'm way better at it than I used to be, for sure. So do you have any tips or things, or what are you looking for when you're meeting those people? Like you've had both sides of this coin. You had to meet a scumbag and build rapport with him.
Yep.
Now you're meeting the good guys who maybe have or problems, and I guess that's probably easier for you because you've walked the walk and you have been in the same scenes and bad situations and had to see the things you can't unsee, and you've got that in common with them. So do you have a little process that you go through to size people up and all, or is it just very intuitive and kind of automatic for you?
Well, some of it is intuitive just because I have the volume of repetition, right? But if somebody were asking advice or wanting to get into this, I think the most human and horseman parallel that we can make is you have to develop your ability to listen. Actually listen, actively listen to the horse or the human being to build the communication. Because what happens in most human communication is that we'll sit here and have a dialogue and it's going back and forth. You're asking a question. I'm thinking about the response to the question and not actively listening to what the rest of the question is. Then I will start to answer, and you're going to start thinking, okay, what is my follow-up question going to be? And it goes back to just being present. If you're wanting to develop your ability to read another human being, listen. If you want to develop your ability to read a horse, listen. They will tell you. And in fact, they will tell you what's important to them. And one question that I've gotten throughout my years of being a podcast host is that how do you know when to ask what questions? I don't write down any of the questions that I ask people. I sit and I listen, and the guests will tell me what's important. And when I catch something that I think is valuable, we'll build on that. Should be no different with the horse. When you're out working a horse, there's often, and tell me this in your experience, how many times have you gone out to the pen and you know what, today we're going to accomplish objective A. And you get out and you get to work in the horse and you're 2 or 3 minutes in and objective A is so far down the road and there's so many other things that need to be addressed that objective A is completely off the map by the end of the day.
All the time.
The horsemanship trainers, not the horsemanship trainers, the horsemanship trainers will stay with A because A is their agenda. A is what's important to them, even though their horses told them, I don't want anything to do with A today. That doesn't mean if you listen and you're a true horseman or you're listening to the people that the humans that you're communicating with in your life, when they tell you B is important, then let's build on B a little bit. And B might reveal C and D and E and F. And before you know it, we've gone down this road that we never even thought we would go down, but we've made constructive progress in the process of that. So actively listening, I think, is if I could give any one bit of advice for communication, whether it be horse or human being, we as human beings need to develop our ability to actively listen to whatever we're communicating with.
Kind of going back to the school thing, we have kids that have reading comprehension and all that stuff, but imagine if one semester of 1 year was teaching active listening, and the 80% of communication that's not said. Like I could say as a clinician, there are a lot of times when I'm working with people that are having a problem and it's sort of a bravery issue on their part. And I'm asking, are they ready to do this? And they answer yes. And the answer was clearly a no, but the word was yes. That happens all the time.
Yes.
So like, okay, well, then we need to back up and we need to do a couple of these other things because you clearly are not ready to actually do that yet.
Correct.
And so I think that's just phenomenal advice. And I definitely think that that's something we could all stand to improve on. I know as I edit these podcasts, I am trying to do exactly what you say, but I also sort of have this structure in my head. I'm trying to keep on what time
Yeah.
are we at and all that stuff, and so it takes away. There are a lot of times when I go back to edit the podcast and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, oh, they were totally telling me to go
Dang, I should have
here, and
jumped
I
on
just
that.
did
Yeah.
not catch that in the moment at all. And then I asked a stupid question instead of the good one I was supposed to ask, right? So
Yeah. But
it
you think
happens.
about it, like I think back in there was one time, so I bought this Palomino horse. He's out in the pasture behind us right now, behind the house. And he was supposed to be the horse to get me to the next level. That's how it was sold to me, right? And I was so green and uneducated that I jumped on the opportunity, not knowing anything about horses or actually connecting a horse and a human together to set off on a journey. I'm grateful for this horse because if I wasn't so outmatched by this horse, I wouldn't have pursued the horsemanship journey that I pursued. If I had more of a turnkey horse that I bought at that time, I might have gone down, quote unquote, kind of the lay horseman's approach. But there was a time when this horse, you put any kind of leg on him, he's a team roping horse, he was a head horse. You put any kind of leg on him, it was 100 miles an hour. There was no form of collection, there was no form of communication. He equated the legs of a human being physically contacting the sides of me on any level was 1,000,000 miles an hour. That's all that he knew. And for a while, I worked on it and tried to get him to where he could think through things and it would be controlled. But inside, I would always have this nerve like, God, if I put my leg on him, he's just going to run off. He's just going to run off. He's just going to run off. And it got to a point where he's never been a runoff horse to where he's unsafe, but he ain't afraid to get after it. Right. So we're sitting in the pen one day and I said, I have control issues as far as him rating and him collecting and him actually taking off and departing in a controlled, articulate manner. We're just going to go. Today we're going to go. We'll put the reins down and we're just going to go with the horse. I'm going to let go of my control issues. And when we had that experience, it was the whole rip the band-aid moment that we discussed previously in this episode, where sometimes, you know what, you got to go through the ugly to get to the good. We had that experience. And then after that, it was not an issue anymore. We could start to work on refinement. We could start to work on mechanics and we could actually think things through. And he came to the realization that there's more to this than just a leg means blast out the gate. Um, and so I think when we talk about it from a horsemanship standpoint, sometimes as a human, we want to hold on to so much control and we want to be that leader so bad that we're getting in everybody's way. Sometimes there has to be the feel component of it. Yes, we're both thinkers by nature. We're headstrong human beings, but sometimes you have to follow that heart or you have to trust some aspect of that heart.
One of the topics I like to talk about with horsemanship is that you have this topic of trust. And I hear people all the time, I want my horse to trust me. And it even the connection thing is now one of these buzzwords. And I like to say, can you trust your horse? It's there's two sides to this. Is your horse actually trustworthy? And a lot of times the solution to that is kind of like what you're talking about with your Palomino horse right there. They're seeking trust from an animal that they can't trust. And
Yeah.
me, we're at, that's a tear down and rebuild kind of a moment right there. If you just keep pursuing this connection with this animal that's dangerous to you and you don't actually stop, back up and do the work with the animal to get them on the right path, you've just wasted a whole lot of time and built yourself a house of cards, and you're going to pay for that at some point in time down the road. So
And that was very much my experience. Even though I've never had a runoff experience where I thought he was going to crash us into a gate or a panel or anything like that, there was still in the back of my mind. But when we had that experience that day, it was one of those things like, I'm not to say you get careless and you become unsafe about things, but based on our relationship and where we had gone, I just had to let go of the fact that if he crashes, then that was just the will for today, and let him go and let him do his thing. And no, he didn't crash me into anything. He didn't run away maliciously or violently. He just there was a mental hurdle there, and I think it was a trust issue on both parts that needed to be addressed, and it got addressed, and we're good, and we move on.
it's like the reverse of laying a horse down. When you
Exactly.
lay the horse down, he's got to give up control and he's kind of got to submit, and nothing bad happens to him. You did the human version of that. You laid
Yeah.
yourself down. You just did it in a saddle without a rope, right? You had to,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
had
It was
to just
me laying down.
Yeah, turn loose of control and survive and thrive on the other side of it, basically.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
So, well, you've got a multitude of podcasts out there right now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about? I know you're about to shift some things around with regard to that in the future. So why don't you kind of give us that roadmap?
Yeah. So the original podcast was Let Freedom Reign. And we started that, I think, back in August of 2018. And that show was spun off of my experiences with Chris and trying to disseminate more of the message about how the horse can help the human being in developing resilience. And when I got home from Chris's 2016 or 17 or so, I had talked to a family member about my experience at Chris's saying, hey, we're trying to get this message out to the world. And how do you do that? I can't figure it out. And he was the guy that I was talking to, the family friend that I was talking to, was a podcast host. And he said, man, just do a podcast about it. I said, man, that's a great idea. But what's a podcast? I didn't know the first thing about it, right? So he showed me the how-tos and whatnots. We launched that show. I was darn near convinced that my mom would be the only person to listen to it. And it wasn't the first couple of weeks. We were in multiple countries and the following grew, and I would get messages literally from all over the world about how these different messages and testimonies would convey with individuals and help them in some of their challenges. So as the podcast opportunities started to grow and as I phased out of law enforcement, started to develop Day Six Ranch more and more, I started getting input from different industries and communities that I'm connected with, the warrior community. Hey, we really like your approach with the horse thing. Could you build like a warrior specific parallel? And then a lot of the cowboys and the warriors both were saying, hey, we need a little help in our Bible study because the most common reason was we work on the weekends or we're performing on the weekends. So we can't regularly make it to church on Sunday. So we can't get plugged into a church, but we believe in what you have to say and kind of your approach. So we'd like some help. That's kind of how the White Horse Remuda podcast got started. And then what was not on the table until recently was Chris's podcast, Come Ride the Journey. We had talked about it the last couple of years, but it never really had gained any traction as far as making it a reality until these last couple months. So as I'm navigating all these podcasts, I'm realizing, well, shoot, if I put out a weekly episode, 16 episodes a month, like I'm going to be a full-time podcast host. With all the man hours that it takes to produce a show, I'm not going to have any chance to work horses, develop my program. So we got to think of a more economical way to do this. So what we're going to do here in this, probably in the next couple of weeks, is we're going to consolidate. Let Freedom Reign podcast will now become, we're shooting to make a Day Six Ranch podcast. And under Day Six Ranch podcast, we'll release weekly episodes and they will vary in content because there's enough parallels between the different industries that we could all be together, but it makes it a little bit more economical for me. So we'll still keep shows that are thematic and work towards the Let Freedom Reign podcast model of how the horses help the human being. The contact and cover episodes, which are kind of warrior community specific, more geared towards human optimization, human performance, mental performance. Those episodes will be consolidated under the brand. And then obviously we have White Horse Remuda, which is our faith-based podcast. I co-host that with J.R. Vazane, who, if you're following, does not know who J.R. Vazane is. In short, he was a professional cowboy. He had a horse flip over on him a couple years ago. It ended up breaking his back. Doctors told him he'd never walk again. And J.R. and God said, watch this. The man has an incredible story, an incredible testimony. He's been a guest on Let Freedom Reign multiple times. He's now the co-host with me on White Horse Remuda. And that show is a Bible study, and it's two guys just walking through life, trying to navigate the Bible the best we can. You know, we're not theologians, we're not college educated in Scripture. We're just trying to navigate what we think God has paved in our path and bring as many people as we can with us, because so many cowboys and so many warriors reached out wanting a little biblical help. We need to have the stones to step off and be disciples, because that's what God has entrusted us with. So, in short, instead of running around and chasing and finding 3 or 4 different podcasts, we're going to consolidate everything under Day Six Ranch podcast. And then obviously Come Ride the Journey with Chris Cox, which I co-host and produce. That's being released under his brand. And that's under, right now we're driving people to Spotify, because it doesn't matter whether you're an Android or iPhone user, everybody can get to Spotify.
Good. And you've kind of, these are some changes, I guess maybe I I didn't organize this well. You made some other pretty big changes in your life and moved across the country here recently and left the warrior life. Well, I guess you never fully leave the warrior life, but you made a professional change and with Day Six Ranch and doing all this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and if you want to get into your family and some of what all you have going on there. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot to it. We'll try to sum this up the best we can. So when I left my first agency, I just had my daughter, and like I said, I wasn't going to let somebody else raise my child. I was overinvested in my profession. I was overinvested in my identity of being a detective and being an undercover guy. That a lot of my personal and professional life was unraveling at a rate that was terrifying, really. And God graciously allowed me to see the writing on the wall, and some changes needed to be made. And I knew that if I wanted to stay in the business that I was in, I had to be closer to home. And that decision took me almost 2 years to make because I was giving up a bunch of seniority, I was giving up credibility in the business, I was giving up a bunch of money and benefits worldly possessions that I was hung up on. Well, I made the jump, and all that money that I was worried about was replaced in the coming months after making the jump between different contract negotiations and incentives, bonuses, things of that sort. I started to repair some of the relationships in my personal life because I physically actually had the time to invest into them. And then as the momentum started to grow of using the horse to help the human being see their value, God lays it on my heart that I'll never forget this. I was sitting at my desk and he just spoke to me and he said, "It's it. We're done. You've served the purpose I've needed you to serve here. You need to go." I said, "Okay, well, what's that mean?" So my wife and I start to search and see what is God calling us to do? What is this supposed to be? I'm supposedly done in this avenue of my life. What's the next chapter going to be? And it was revealed to us that Day Six Ranch needs to become a serious thing and not just a social podcast that I do. And so I start to do the research and do the homework and do the due diligence. And the decision is made that if I'm going to do it right, I have to walk away from law enforcement. I have to give up everything, everything, the certainty of paychecks and investment accounts and freeze retirements, sell my house, sell assets, because this is where we needed to be. And that decision was made in a matter of months versus years. And it was so much more of a higher stakes decision. But I tell people, God and hard work have never failed me a day in my life. And just because the trajectory of my life has changed and the focus and the mission of my life and his calling for my life has changed doesn't mean all those things that he's made me to be in the form of seeking a professional approach to things, in the work ethic and the drive and the passion and the fire that he's given me, none of that changes, just the focus in which I point all those changes. So we did what we thought we were asked to do, and we sold the house, and I turned in the badge and the gun and came out here and started to develop Day Six Ranch. And it's been a challenging couple of years because I've had quite a bit of experience in the entrepreneurial world, but we're trying to get websites developed and curriculums developed, and we've had some public appearances scheduled where I've been able to go out and speak. And then, like we talked about, growing the different podcast brands and things of this sort. So hopefully in the next couple months, we'll be able to officially roll out our coaching program, our mentor program, and people can sign up and enroll. And it'll be a one-on-one experiential based optimization program to where we help people get the best out of life, given their skills, their ability, their resources, and then travel around the country and start helping some of these veteran service organizations with best practices as far as using the horse to effectively serve their missions and purposes. So it's been an unbelievable journey, going from getting a government check that's going to show up to, every 2 weeks, to not having a paycheck at all and trying to learn how to be an entrepreneur. We also started the India 6-8 Foundation, and that foundation is geared towards the education and integration side of the warrior and Western world. There's so many trainers and so many parts of the Western industry that are looking for credible help. And there's so many warriors that are looking for purpose again in their life, whether they're making transition in or out of the profession or within the profession. And we saw the characteristics in which that make up the warrior and the Western person are so common that our job is to kind of bridge those gaps. And the foundation was started a couple months back, and we're still waiting on the IRS to bless us with that 501c3. But we've already started to try to integrate and show our influence. We took a huge group of first responders and veterans out to Road to the Horse this last year, and we helped with part of the ground crew and running the arena logistics and operation side of thing. And we've started to get some vets connected with different trainers across the country and get them poured into. And so many of them are coming back now, texting us like, I've been lost for years after I came back from a deployment. And as soon as I sat in that saddle, I knew this is where I needed to be. And to think of God's grace and giving me the ability to make those connections and to bridge that gap to give an individual to find purpose. Because it's not about it. It is about the individual, but it isn't. Like the guy that I'm talking about who said he found his place in the saddle again, it's like, if he would have gone astray and left to fight his own battle alone, his children are going to be raised in that environment. And then what are those children going to be subject to? Right. And the trickle effect is just going to have such a negative impact. But now they're going to get a father that's going to be highly involved, highly engaged, have a better skill set to raise these children in. And that's where we're trying to really make the impact, because the warriors are such highly functional human beings who have bared an incredible burden that sometimes they just need a little polishing on that brass for everything to shine through again. And that's where we're trying to systematically make the change and really impact the world in which we live.
And I guess we have had a predominantly male-based conversation here, but there are obviously female operators and EMS and police officers and military personnel and all. And so you certainly are open to working with them as well, correct?
Absolutely. And I get the question all the time, well, what's a warrior? Do you have to be combat deployed? And I'm thinking, if you look at what represents a warrior, does a single mother not represent that? Does a janitor not represent that? Right? They are serving at such a rate in their lives that sometimes they just can't bear the burdens of life. Right? So it doesn't have to be, I'm combat deployed, I'm a cop, I'm a firefighter, I'm a doctor, right? It's somebody who's serving humanity and serving humanity nobly. And despite the professional experience of that individual, we all have our own internal struggles and battles. And like I said, yes, my skill set is geared towards the warrior community. And it doesn't matter whether it's male or female. It's the character of the human being in which we're trying to address. But there's plenty of people that I've mentored who aren't formal warriors, that never saw combat deployment, that never answered a 911 radio call, right? They're professional athletes, they're CEOs, they're the quote unquote soccer mom. There's, if you're looking to add value to your life, if you're looking to get the most that you can, and I tell people, we have a year in which your life starts and we have a year in which your life ends. Okay, that's what's going to go on your gravestone. There's a little dash in between. How bold do we want to make that dash? If you're looking to thicken that sucker up, then let's roll. Let's get on with it. You don't have to be a combat deployed warrior. You don't have to be a cop just to be accepted in my program. You don't even have to like horses. Right? If you're looking to get more out of life and optimize your ability to be an asset to serve your community, then let's roll.
I like it. Yep. Well, I gotta say, I'm a little out of topics without opening a much larger can of worms here. And I don't want to monopolize your time. We're about 2 hours in at this point. What are your thoughts? Is there any question I haven't asked that you wish I had asked, or topic to cover that you'd like to discuss? Or
I think we got the bases covered from my opinion, or my aspect of it. I am very much open to follow-up episodes. If you're going back through and you listen to this and you think we need to develop other points, then hit me up and let's do this again. Because the way I see it and the way I've always seen it in life is that I would rather take 6 teammates and go shoulder to shoulder who I know are on the same mission and warpath than take 100 people who have mediocre commitment. Right? So you and I, we met for a reason. We aligned for a reason. We see eye to eye for a reason. So if there's anything that I can do to support you or your brand with follow-up episodes, then let's do it. If we can partner together for events, let's partner together for events. Because really for me, it's just showing people their value. And it doesn't, I've had my day in the spotlight. I don't need to be the man. I just want to help serve human beings the best I can. So I'll just leave that as an open door, man.
Yeah. And I guess one other, just a quick, you're now in Texas, is that right?
Yes, sir. We're in North Texas.
Most of your services do not have to be face to face, though. You're
No,
open.
everything is no. The coaching program is an online based program, so you could be anywhere in the world, and we could serve a purpose. And even the in person events, yeah, there might be some logistic challenges, but if we need to do something in person in the form of a speaking engagement or a group mentoring or coaching session or clinic, then by all means reach out. That's not just because you're not in North Texas doesn't mean that we don't have access or reach or we can't get connected.
Yeah. These Zoom conferences really, they have tremendous capabilities and all, and it really is. I mean, I haven't released the episode yet, but I did one not long ago with a guy in Romania, and
No
here we
way.
are having a face to face live conversation, and he's
That
in
is
another
cool.
continent. I did a live lesson with a lady in Canada. Her husband just held up an iPad
No kidding.
and we wound up. I told her I thought her horse had some neurological problems, and she wound up taking it to the vet. He agreed, and now the horse is on a treatment path, and she's been having troubles for 6 months, and we solved it in one live lesson where
Dang,
I could watch it
that is
with my
powerful.
own eyes. This is really a pretty cool time we live in, although technology can certainly be a pain in the neck at times. So
Yes. Yes.
anyway, well, Jason, it's been a very enlightening conversation. I appreciate you coming on. I definitely would like to chat with you in the future as you get more of these things opened up and going forth. And I certainly applaud what you're trying to do. That's definitely a community that deserves to be served, and I think is not served to the degree that they should be an awful lot of times, particularly the military community. I mean, a tremendous part of the homeless population and all are vets, and that's just an absolute travesty and a black eye on our entire society for allowing that stuff to happen. So I'm proud to know you, and I'm fully on board with your mission. I'll return the favor. If there's anything I can do to help you with that deal, I don't know what that would look like, but if you see a thing where it looks like, hey, Daniel could do something here, it's a yes. Just let me know where I need to be and what I need to do, and I'm glad to do it. So
No, I appreciate that. And it's been an honor to be on the show. And I'm very grateful for your friendship. And I truly believe that your education and the approach that you take in educating horsemen on what a bit really is and what it should be is a profound gap that needs to be filled in the horsemanship community because we have that very stereotypical answer of we're not getting control, so let's get a bigger bit. And you very articulately break that down and make it very palatable to where it's effective. And really, I mean, so much of this episode has been based on service. You know, that is a service that you're providing the horsemanship industry that will leave a lasting impression for generations to come. And it's a profound thing that you've done in pursuing that education because there's a lot to it and there's so much marketing involved. And with that marketing, sometimes bits can be marketed deceptively. So you bring truth and you bring light to it. And I was I was smiling ear to ear throughout your presentation at Best Horse Practices Summit. I mean, it was an incredible opportunity, and I don't know how much I would presume your following has sat through that presentation on some level or watched the DVD, but it's been an honor, and anything that I can do to support adult onset of horsemanship or anything that you got going on, the offers reciprocated, my friend.
well, thank you much. And folks will have, of course, links to his podcasts and website and all of that stuff. Do you have other social media, YouTube or Facebook or anything like that? I haven't found that. But
Yeah, right now we're most active on. I say active. That's a pretty dang relative term right now because technology is definitely not my strong suit. Facebook and Instagram under Day Six Ranch. And then we have the website day6ranch.com, which is DAY, the number six, RANCH.com. You can reach out to me through any of those platforms. Like I said, Let Freedom Reign podcast is out now. We just released a pilot series for White Horse Remuda under that brand. And then Contact and Cover will be coming soon. Come Ride the Journey with Chris Cox is out now on Spotify. So those are some of the podcasts that I've been involved in as far as hosting, co-hosting, or producing.
all right. Well, thank you, Jason, and we'll definitely be back in touch down the road. So hope y'all enjoyed this one. We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.